Hey guys, thanks again for coming to the channel. And today I want to give you some tips on how to select jerk baits and why you would select certain ones. And you know what happens a lot of times is somebody will watch a video or hear friends talking or see something that somebody else is doing with a jerk bait and they think, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do that too. And then they walk into the store and they look up on the rack and there's all kinds of jerk baits on there. There's little ones, big ones, different colors, different sizes, deep diving, not deep diving, floaters, and the whole deal. And you really kind of need to know what you're trying to do with a particular jerk bait before you purchase one, because they're not all created equal and they all have different purposes. Just like tools, they all have different purposes. So once you define what you're trying to do, then you're going to try to fit the jerkbait to the pattern or the technique that you're trying to achieve. For example, wintertime jerkbait fishing is going to be completely different than summertime jerkbait fishing. And spawn jerkbaiting, which is a thing, is again completely different from the other two. You would use a completely different kind of style for each of those situations. So let's go through them. You basically got about 5 different kinds of jerkbaits. You have slow sinking, slow rising, suspending, floating, and topwater. So which ones would you use for which situations? Well, let's start with this one. This one is a slow rising jerkbait. It's also a deep diving jerkbait. This one's designed to go 5 to 8 feet at its deepest, and the longer you pause, the more it rises towards the surface. Now, what I would use this particular jerkbait for would be more clear water, again, and deeper situations where you're trying to reach the fish at a deeper depth than some other people would. So you're going to get down 5 to 8 feet. But what happens a lot of times with these rising, slow rising jerkbaits is if you get around a lot of these lakes in the wintertime and you have, like a shad kill, and you look around and you see these shad kind of floating around and kicking around on the surface that have kind of died from the cold weather, that's when you want to use this slow rising jerkbait, because it mimics exactly what's happening in the ecosystem that you're fishing. So it's usually a really cold water type situation in a clear water situation. So next you have, now they're hooked together here, you have what they call a slow sinking jerkbait. Now this one's 2 to 4 foot, smaller lip, for shallower situations. But the good thing about this particular jerkbait, while it goes 2 to 4 foot, I find it actually does more like 5 feet on a long cast, you can let this one sink. So you can fish shallower water by keeping it moving with shorter pauses, or deeper water by fishing it with long pauses and going down. And again, that's also probably, to me, the most effective presentation for a jerkbait. I like the slow sinking. I think that draws more strikes than the suspending or the slow rising in the cold water situations where you're going to be fishing it. So that's the second one. And then you have suspending jerkbaits. This is a mixed stick suspending jerkbait. And this one is meant to suspend, especially, they even tell you, especially in cold water it suspends better. In warmer water it may rise just a hair, just because the oxygen level in the water and the density of the water is a little bit different when it's cold. So you have this suspending jerkbait. This is when, the best time to use this is when you can either see the target or you have forward facing sonar and you know what you're looking at, and you're trying to get this bait just above either the bait or the fish that's there, and then you just want to stop it and let it sit there. So let's add a little tip in here for jerkbaits. This is a very important tip for jerkbait because this is key to you being able to catch them no matter what you select. And that is, that jerkbait should always stay above the fish and not below the fish. If you start working a jerkbait beneath the fish, you're going to get very few bites from those fish. They're always going to want to come up to it, especially in the wintertime. So that helps you select what you're trying to do. So if you're a pond fisherman, small lake fisherman, and deep water is 8 or 10 foot in your pond or lake, then you're going to want a 2 to 4 or 3 to 5 foot deep jerkbait to keep that above the fish. If you're fishing in a deeper, clearer reservoir and those fish are 20 foot down or even deeper than that, then you're going to want a deep diving jerkbait, something that gets down 8 foot or maybe even 10 foot down. And if they won't come up to that 10 feet from 20 feet or so to it, then you would add in maybe like the deep diving, slow sinking version of the jerkbait so that you can let that jerkbait settle down on that school of fish that just won't come up 10 or 12 or 20 feet for it, and get it 5 feet or so above their head so they'll come and respond to it. So remember that tip and it'll definitely help you catch more fish. And the fish will take notice of it and come up and eat it. And you can take this, or the other situation is like, there's a big rock down there, or there's a tip of a tree sticking out over the channel, and you want this bait to stop just right out in front of the tip of that tree and just kind of sit there and tantalize those fish. And you're using this again in cold water situations where the fish are kind of lethargic and they're not going to really chase anything down, but if it's just sitting there and looks like an easy meal, they'll go, well, he hadn't swam off yet, so let me go up there and taste him and see if he's any good. And he comes up and eats a suspending jerkbait. And the good thing about a suspending jerkbait, or one of the things about a suspending jerkbait, is you can add some weight to it. So I put a little suspend dot on there if you want it to sink slowly, like this one sinks slowly. Bad thing about this one is if you want it to suspend, it's not going to. So you can't unadd a suspending dot to this one. You can add one to this one. So this one actually would serve two purposes for you if you needed it to. And then we have the floating jerkbait. Now this is a Smithwick Rogue, and a little trick for you guys that may not understand, a Smithwick Rogue comes with two different color eyes. This one has a yellow eye. See the yellow eye? Yellow eye is a floating jerkbait. So if you put it, they don't write it on here. If you put it in your tackle box and you forget that, was that a suspender or was that a floater? Without having to tie it on or set it down in the water and see if it floats back up, it might sink. You can tell by the eye. And then the suspending rogues will have a red eye. So you got yellow eye as a floater, red eye is for a suspender. And a floater is generally, does exactly what you say. You throw it out, you jerk it in, and if you stop it, it's going to float to the surface. And that's best used two ways. You're fishing around relatively shallow, snaggy cover, and if you keep working it down, you're going to be hung up all the time. You can take the floater, work it down, and let it float up over the stuff, and work it down and let it float up over the stuff. And another time I would use the floater would be around real close to spawning, pre-spawn, or actual spawning fish. I love to take a floating jerkbait, throw it out over the bed, jerk it down over the bed, and let it float up over top, and then maybe just twitch it a little bit and let it kind of sit there. That's a technique that a lot of people don't use. It works good too with other topwater baits like poppers and things like that. So they're the four mostly used, and then you have a couple of these really what they call real high floaters. I don't have any here with me today that are basically used almost kind of like a wake bait. But they're the four ones. So identify what you're trying to do. Are you fishing around the spawn? Are you trying to entice a fish on a bed? Are you fishing in the middle of the winter time and you need a suspending jerkbait to draw a strike or a sinking jerkbait or a slow rising jerkbait. And then one thing we didn't talk about was using jerkbaits in warm weather. And you know, that tends to kind of get put on the back burner by a lot of people because there's so many baits that work, you know, in warm weather. Pretty much everything that you have works in warm weather. So sometimes picking up a jerkbait in the heat of summer is going to get you bites that you wouldn't get other times of year. Me, I don't throw it much in the summertime. It works. When I do throw it, I catch fish on it, but there's just so many other baits that you can use, flukes, you know, because year-round cover a lot, and other types of baits that just are kind of easier to fish and less wear and tear on your body than working a jerkbait. So there are the different kind of jerkbaits. When you go to the store, have an idea what you're trying to achieve. Understand, just don't pick one up and walk out with it because you might not get the one that is designed to work for what you're trying to achieve. Again, thanks for watching and have a blessed day.